order. The Committee on House Administration, for purposes of today's hearing, Transforming the Government Publishing Office for the 21st Century and Beyond, Part 3 of our hearing series examining the Federal Depository Library Program. The hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days, so members may submit any materials they wish to include. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. I'll keep my remarks brief to allow more time for questions and answers. However, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our witnesses who make up our 2 panels. Most of our witnesses have traveled from different parts of the country to be with us today, and our committee appreciates their attendance. Additionally, I believe for all of you, this is your first time testifying before a congressional committee, and we welcome you. I know today's hearing is significant in many regards, most notably because the structure and operational aspects of the Federal Depository Library Program, or FDLP, as it is commonly referred, have not been thoroughly examined since it was created in 1962. And if you think back to 1962, the Beatles were touring. The late John Glenn became the first American to orbit around the Earth, and Walmart opened its first store. As we all know, times have changed since then. The digital revolution not only changed the way information is created, maintained, and disseminated, but it also changed the way in which the public consumes that information. That means for the Federal Depository Library Program and the 1,150 libraries that participate in the program, the technological advances have brought many questions. Created to disseminate government information through a network of participating libraries, those current programs set up under Chapter 19 contemplate an ink-on-paper hard copy framework. The technological advances that have moved consumers of information away from hard copy documents to digital formats challenge this, with many people who would consider an archaic framework. For example, government documents are now born digital, meaning that they are created electronically and are transmitted via the internet. Some federal publications are only available on federal agencies' websites. Many federal government documents are not captured in this program and are considered fugitive documents. Finally, there are costs associated with ensuring technology remains up to date. Notwithstanding these emerging issues, libraries must also continue to grapple with cumbersome processes, such as making sure paper-based collections are up to date and complete and ensuring collections are preserved accordingly. Many of the libraries that participate are also facing storage issues. These are just some of the issues that we'll examine today. And I'd like to now recognize Ms. Lofgren for the purpose of providing an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for calling this hearing and for paying attention to the Government Publishing Office, and specifically today, the Federal Depository Library Program, or the FDLP. The FDLP has a presence really in each one of our districts, and it plays a very important, if sometimes overlooked, role in keeping America informed. As the committee hears from these distinguished witnesses and considers reforms to the FDLP, we have to keep in mind the program's founding principles. Government information should be free and available to all. We must protect the privacy of citizens and make available information that's never put on paper so that these important documents of our government are available for everyone to use forever. A modern and vibrant FDLP is not just about students and scholars and authors and researchers of today. It's about making sure that authentic documents about the work of our government is available tomorrow and many tomorrows after that. It's the service that these librarians and their institutions have provided to the public for generations, and I look forward to hearing from them about how we can help give them what they need to do it better. And Mr. Chairman, in some ways, I was talking the other day about regular order and how many of us have decried the passing of the regular order. I think that although this may not be a headline gathering hearing, it is the kind of thoughtful work that responsibly must be made to make sure that government works well. And I want to thank you for convening this hearing, and I'm eager to participate with you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Lofgren. Any other member wish to make an opening statement? Seeing none, I'd now like to introduce our first panel's witness, and it's my privilege to introduce Laurie Hall, who serves as the Acting Superintendent of Documents for the United States Government Publishing Office. Ms. Hall has worked with the Government Publishing Office since 1985. Before accepting the superintendent position, Ms. Hall served as managing director. She has a bachelor's degree in art history and American studies from the University of Virginia and a master's degree in library science from Catholic University. Ms. Hall, the committee has received your written testimony. You'll have 5 minutes to present a summary of that submission. And to help you keep time, you'll see the timers on the desk there. The device will have a green light for 4 minutes, and will turn yellow with 1 minute, and then the light will turn red, and we'll certainly let you know then that time would be up. And we welcome you to this committee. Look forward to hearing your testimony. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Harper, Ms. Lofgren, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to join in the discussion about Title 44 and the evolution of the Federal Depository Library Program. My name is Laurie Hall, and I'm currently serving as Acting Superintendent of Documents and Managing Director of Library Services and Content Management. I have worked in support of the FDLP since joining GPO in 1985, and I currently oversee a very dedicated staff of 94 librarians and information professionals that administer the 4 statutorily mandated programs: the Federal Depository Library Program, the Cataloging and Indexing Program, the International Exchange Service with the Library of Congress, and the Bylaw Distribution Program. The Superintendent of Documents organization implements strategic programs and operations in partnerships with our 1,143 libraries, nationwide Federal Depository Libraries, and in collaboration with colleagues at GPO, with agency publishers, and national libraries. The historic program that is the FDLP has legislative roots that date back to 1813. In those 204 years, the program, in partnership with our libraries, continually evolves to meet the needs of the public seeking information about, and official publications and information about their government. Along the way, Title 44 has been modified, tweaked, interpreted to help the Superintendent of Documents organization better administer the program, working with our oversight committee, the Joint Committee on Printing. One most recent challenge has been the introduction of digital formats. When the 1993 GPO Access Act was passed, the Superintendent of Documents and the agency as a whole took on an entirely new set of responsibilities, developed new systems and infrastructure, modified workflows, revised policies and procedures, acquired new skill sets, and launched new services for our libraries and the public. Today, we have nearly 25 years of experience providing digital information to our depository community. Another example of where the FDLP moved forward was in 2002, when a new technology was available and an obsolete practice could be eliminated as it no longer served our community. Currently in Title 44, Section 1711, the law requires GPO to print a monthly catalog of documents. We asked the Joint Committee on Printing to approve a project to implement an integrated library system with a new online public access catalog, eliminating paper production of the catalog. A Title 44, Section 1711 waiver was issued for the project in 2007. Today, the catalog of U.S. government publications, we call it the CGP, contains close to 1 million bibliographic records for historic and current government information products and access to digital resources housed in FDCIFs or GovInfo, agency websites, and partner libraries. Access to this information has increased exponentially. But not only is the GPO organization changing in the digital age, our libraries are obviously changing too to meet the new challenges of serving up government information to their communities. As we meet, work, and visit our libraries, we find that many of them are facing major budget cuts, decreased staffing levels, and have significant space issues. They tell us they need more flexibility in managing the collections in order to remain a member of the FDLP. They tell us they need more services from GPO to help identify, find, and collect digital government information, while still requiring certain products in tangible formats. For those libraries that have large historic print collections, they're looking to GPO to assist in projects that preserve these national assets while helping to mitigate space and storage issues. For these reasons, Director Vance Cooks asked the Depository Library Council, the FDLP community at large, and other stakeholders to provide inputs on changes to Title 44. To date, we have received over 130 submissions, and we are continuing to evaluate them. Some of the major themes that have surfaced are continuing to ensure free public access, preserving collections of all formats, providing libraries with additional options to select and receive material, offering grants for enhanced services, and sharing collections and services across state boundaries for regional libraries. While some of the recommendations for changes to Title 44 are simple language changes, others could require investigations and analysis, new types of collaborations and partnerships, and potential organizational changes in order to find optimal solutions. The Superintendent of Documents organization is ready to take on these new challenges to best serve our libraries and the public seeking information about their government. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hall. And now we get to ask you some questions.
Okay.
The committee certainly is honored that you would be here. We will now have an opportunity. Each member will have 5 minutes each to ask you questions that they have. And obviously the members are going to be looking at the clock as well. And I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes, and I'll start by asking you a few questions. And before I do that, I certainly want to acknowledge that we're honored to have in the hearing room today Davita Vance Cooks. Ms. Vance Cooks is the Director of GPO, and it's probably better to just be here to visit as opposed to testify, right? So, but we're honored to have you here with us today. So you can relax. That's it. Ms. Hall, can you tell us how much money is spent providing tangible documents to regional libraries?
You know, somebody asked me that question just before I came. We have not really investigated how much money per library. Regional libraries in the past had to select or receive all of the material. Now they're allowed to receive different formats. Some may receive microfiche, some may receive paper, and there are some particular titles that they do not have to receive. So each collection is a little bit varied. As well, libraries have been in the program for a long time. So yeah, we've not done that kind of investigation on how much of, because we usually develop services that will help all of the libraries, the smallest to the largest. So,
right, well, even without maybe the totals, would it be the same cost for each regional library?
In terms of no, because we send them more materials, so the cost of publications, the number of titles would be more, and the postage would be more, just from a tangible distribution perspective.
Let's talk just a small item, but maybe not so small with what you have to do, would be shipping costs. So do we have an indication of what the shipping costs would be, perhaps depending upon where the regional library is located, and how is that shipped to them?
Yeah, depending on where they're located, it costs more, and we have different services to get it to Alaska, to Puerto Rico, yeah, rather than sending it down the street to Virginia. Yeah, I don't have those with me, but I can get you those costs.
It probably wouldn't hurt if we could just take a look at those, if you could gather those up and send those to us in the future.
Okay.
And obviously, as those costs are different, we realize that. But let me shift over for a minute. In Chapter 19, government publication is defined as, quote, informational matter which is published as an individual document at government expense or as required by law. But if you move over to Chapter 41, the term federal electronic information means, quote, federal public information stored electronically. Are these definitions consistent? And should there be a single definition for the entire title? And if so, give us a little guidance here on what your thoughts are.
My opinion is I would like to have a consistent definition because in the way the information is produced, even the agencies still ask us, you know, when you go to Title 44, it says print publications. When they ask us, well, do I have to let you know about digital publications? We say yes. We've always considered government information, regardless of format, and within scope of the program, it's not for national security, you know, not for administrative use, as part of the program.
You know, that has been our ongoing, you know, struggle here as we look at something that really hasn't been changed as the way that the items are disseminated and now stored. It's time for a look. So we would be very interested in your input as we go forward on this. And I know the members will also have some questions here to ask. So with that, I'm going to stop and recognize Ms. Lofgren for 5 minutes for any questions that she may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I wanted to ask a question about standards developed by private entities that are incorporated by reference into law. It's my understanding that these standards are only minimally accessible through a small number of federal depository libraries, or citizens can pay money to the standard development organization that developed them for a copy or to access the standards. Now, if we pass a law and we incorporate these privately developed standards for regulating, usually it's regulating health or food safety, infrastructure, building, fire codes, even children's playgrounds equipment, these standards are as much of the law as anything we write, you know, down at Legislative Council. So the question I have is whether we can take a step forward to make sure that these standards are more accessible to the public than I think they currently are. I honestly think there's a huge due process problem here. If the law applies to you, but you don't have the capacity to find out what it is without paying a fee, I think that's a due process violation. But the question is, what can FDLP do to increase physical access to these standards? And what should the FDLP do to increase digital offsite access to these standards? And what should Congress do to assist you in this?
Yeah. We have some examples of that in the past when, and my colleagues can correct me if I get the names wrong, but the Commerce Department at one particular time transferred some of their information from a print to a digital service. And it was a fee service. And we, as a depository, the FDLP program, worked with the Commerce Department to allow and provide access for our depository libraries to get into that information free. So there are some scenarios that we have done in the past to make sure that if patrons coming into libraries needed access to a database of information that was in scope of the program, that they had ability to get in freely without paying. So we do have some models that we've used in the past that may still apply to this, and we've been able to give our depository libraries access to quite a few things.
Well, I'm wondering if, you know, maybe after this hearing we can follow up with some examples on this, because there's litigation underway about this, but it is really an important issue, I think, or due process in the United States. I have a question about how the GPO provides depository libraries with preservation best practices information, and specifically digital best practices. If you have, you know, a piece of information, digital information, it's only valuable if you can read it, which relates to not just having the data, but having the access to the program to read the data. That may seem easy right now, but 100 years from now it may not. Right. And so I'm wondering what efforts are we being making to make sure not only the GPO, but all of our sister and brother libraries are maintaining access to the data?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. This is a relatively new field. We at GPO work with other organizations, national libraries, in collaboration on these particular issues. For the FDLP, we have a preservation librarian, and we're in the process of hiring a digital preservation librarian. We have provided webinars and information exchange for our libraries on preserving tangible and digital objects. We are in the process of getting ready to do an audit for our trusted digital repository, which will be the first in the government. We've done a self-audit of FDSys GovInfo, so we're becoming more and more familiar with long-term preservation and collection of digital assets. So,
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair will now recognize Mr. Davis, the Vice Chairman of the Committee, for 5 minutes for the purpose of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director, thank you for the tour a few weeks ago. I learned a lot about the GPO. Appreciate the time that many of your employees took to show us around, and they were great. I just wanted to relay my personal thanks. Ms. Hall, thanks for being here today. GPO has published a document titled Legal Requirements and Program Regulations of the Federal Depository Library Program, which were downloaded from fdlp.gov. It's dated June 2011. Are these the most current SUDOCS regulations?
yes.
Okay.
We are in the process of doing some revision of those, and we've done those online so that we can revise them and not ad hoc basis. So yeah, we're in the process of doing those.
All right. How were those regulations? How are these created?
A lot of them are really like best practices. They're based on interpretations of Title 44, working with our libraries, what works. So yeah, it's to give them guidance and how, working with our outreach librarians, how to deal with certain situations in libraries. So.
Okay. As a legislative branch agency, we know GPO is not required to follow the Administrative Procedures Act. However, did GPO follow the spirit of the act, including noticing the FDLP community and seeking comments from them as these regulations were contemplated?
Yes, we always do. We either formally, on our travels, meeting with librarians, give them copies of these, work with them. We have committees, our Depository Library Council worked with our staff on that particular document. So yeah, we always have input from the community, the associations, and our working librarians when we draft those kind of documents.
Well, thank you. As somebody who represents an FDLP at the University of Illinois, that communication is very much appreciated. We've heard from some selective libraries that they often must take additional documents in a particular category in order to get the specific documents they would like to get. Would you please describe to us how that process works and for these types of libraries?
Yeah, that process has been going on since about 1940, where we have general categories of materials from a particular agency. So you'll have the Department of Agriculture, and you can select general publications, which is everything like pamphlets, brochures, whatever, that kind of thing. And if you select that, you get a wide random offering. But there are specific categories where you can say, I only want the annual reports, and you'll only get the annual reports. It is an old system. You get stuff you don't want particularly. And it's something we've talked about with our libraries many times about how to modify it, change it. We have a lot of public libraries that are interested in, like I said, only getting specific documents, and in tangible format. So we've been talking to them about different kinds of solutions to get them only the things that they really want.
So 1940s. I wasn't here then.
Well, neither was I.
In Congress or here. So, I mean, it seems in today's day and age, with much more being printed online, that this selective process ought to be able to work better. So
I agree, totally agree.
How would you change that? How would you make it work better?
In talking to the public libraries, a lot of the little public libraries, they want something which I kind of call a la carte ordering. You know, here is the new title that's come out. Do I want a digital record for it to put in my catalog, or do I want a printed document? Check. So some of the libraries that are smaller and want different formats and have very, very specific things that they know their community wants, that may work. Now, for the bigger institutions, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. But that's one suggestion.
Do you consider the University of Illinois system to be a bigger institution?
Yes, yeah. And they have a long history of selecting a lot of materials for a lot of purposes to serve, you know, academic communities. Yeah, there are different needs in different institutions.
Okay. Well,
but it's going to be a good challenge. Yeah.
Is there anything we can do as a committee to be helpful in that process?
I think we'll let you know.
Besides not having you come here to testify? Hey, thank you for your comment. I appreciate your time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognize Mr. Raskin for the purpose of questions for 5 minutes.
But I actually have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, gentleman yields back. Now recognize gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Walker, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your time today as always. In the U.S. government published office's response to a number of questions for the record from earlier hearings regarding the GPO's visit to a number of depository libraries, GPO responded with this. While most libraries do not want to commit to preservation services for federal publications, they are concerned that these services be done by the government and others to ensure that there is permanent public access for these resources. You probably remember that, familiar with it. Is it correct that the superintendent of documents would be that the government, in quotations, in this instance? Could superintendent of documents provide that service? What are the costs associated with providing the comprehensive service? And one last question, since we've thrown three at you real quick, is could the superintendent of docs partner with an organization such as Hattie Trust?
Yeah. Our model that we would like to use is more of a collaborative model. We have some things that we have centralized, like FDsys.gov.info, but right now we have different libraries who we collaborate with to preserve certain parts of the collection, and also for digital as well. We have libraries that are digital partners with us. So we like the collaborative model rather than a centralized model at this particular, to do both preservation of tangible and digital. Yeah, and we have reached out to Hattie probably every year since 2015 to potentially work with them. They have an access model. We are looking more for a preservation model for storing materials, both tangible and digital. So, but yeah, collaboration is the key.
Well, how hopeful are you that this collaborative model will work long-term to resolving some of these concerns?
They do. For instance, we have a new program that's called the Preservation Stewards. So we do have libraries that want to preserve tangible documents, some massive collections and some smaller collections. Mm-hmm. So we have agreements with them that they're committed to save these documents, and we renew those agreements every 5 years. Mm-hmm. Then we have some libraries, the University of North Texas is one of them, who is one of our digital partners and is preserving digital information that right now is not in FDsys.gov.info. So we have a partnership with them as well. So it's kind of a collaborative, scattered model.
Okay. We understand that one of the benefits of federal agencies using the GPO Express program through FedEx office is that the superintendent of documents has an opportunity to review print orders for possible inclusion in the FDLP. How does that superintendent of documents review work? Can you share some light on that?
Well, it doesn't work now. We did some investigation and study. We were looking at all of the files that came from GPO Express for about 5 years. And what we found was that majority of stuff coming through GPO Express program was slides, pages from a document, publications that agency personnel were using to do presentations. A lot of times they weren't complete documents.
You said for years.
For years, and I can give you a report. I don't have it with me, but a report. We found that it took a lot of staff time to go through file by file by file, and it was much easier to actually go to the agency website and get a complete document. That also has more provenance. It's at the agency website. So we found that the GPO Express program was not a really good source of complete government information that was in scope of the program.
So your long-term suggestion or solution would be what?
My long-term suggestion was to continue to do outreach to the agencies, and we do that on a regular basis. We're in the process of doing a study with the Library of Congress Federal Research Division, and they're surveying specific agencies, talking not only to their printing officers, but to their publishing officers. They're not necessarily the same people anymore because the digital publishers put things on the web, but the printers, they're different offices often, to try to find out how to best get that information from agencies. So we would rather work more with the agencies directly to get their material.
Thank you very much. With that, I yield back to the chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith, for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Superintendent. I was wondering what the cost to provide tangible documents would be to selective libraries, and is there a difference in cost between libraries, or, for example, a difference in cost between East Coast or West Coast? And then who makes the final decision on how money per library is spent, and is there a limit?
Yeah, right now we don't actually have, we have not done a study in my 30 years about the cost per types of libraries because each library is so different. A selective library, one library may select 10%, one may select 60%. One may be in California, one may be in Virginia. So there's no formula or investigation we've done to date that because they're all so different. I guess that's the best way of saying it. Postage costs are different depending on where they're located, if they're in Puerto Rico or they're in Nebraska. So we don't really have that sense. And when we develop programs or projects, we try to develop them that will have an impact for all libraries. Or a service that all of them can utilize. We're in the process of doing some new service called LibGuides. It's a library term. Librarians know about it. And we're developing it so all of our libraries would have access to it, you know, and it can be used by all types of libraries, big and small. So, but all right. That information, we could potentially do some investigation if you would like.
Thank you.
Okay.
I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. That concludes the questioning, Ms. Hall. We want to thank you very much for being here. And without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair additional written questions for the witness, which we will forward and ask the witness to respond as promptly as she can so that her answers may be a part of the record. We want to thank you for being here and wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
coming. Appreciate it. With that, I'll now invite our second panel of witnesses to the table, and we'll take a moment to get everyone set in place. I want to thank each of you for being here, and I'm going to take a minute to introduce each of you before we allow you time to give your testimony. Selena McDonald is the librarian for government documents, law, criminology, and criminal justice at the University of Maryland. Ms. McDonald previously served as an assistant librarian at Clemson University. She earned her bachelor's degree in Russian studies and English from Lehigh University and her master's degree in the science of information from the University of Michigan's School of Information. Beth Williams serves as Stanford Law School Library Director. She has served as the Director of the Law Library and Information Services at Louisiana State University Law Center and Head of Public Services at Columbia Law School, where she also taught legal research. Ms. Williams earned her law degree from Syracuse University College of Law, a master's degree in library and information science from the University of Washington Information School, a master's degree in philosophy from Marquette University, and a bachelor's degree in humanities from the University of West Florida. I'm dizzy just reading all of that. Welcome, Ms. Williams. Stephen Parks serves as the State Librarian of Mississippi. Before he was elected to the position by the Mississippi Legislature, Mr. Parks served as a research, instructional services, and circulation librarian at Mississippi College School of Law, while also teaching legal research there. Mr. Parks has a bachelor's degree from East Carolina University, a law degree from Mississippi College School of Law, and a master's degree in library and information science from the University of Southern Mississippi. Mike Furlow serves as the Executive Director of Hathi Trust Digital Library. Mr. Furlow previously served as both the Assistant Dean and later the Associate Dean for Research and Scholarly Communications at Penn State University Libraries. Mr. Furlow received a master's degree in English and American Literature from the University of Virginia. I want to welcome each of you here to testify today. This is going to be very helpful to us to see how this actually works on the ground in the real world there. And we're excited to have you, look forward to hearing you. The committee has obviously received your written testimonies and had an opportunity to review that. So each witness will have 5 minutes to present a summary of that submission, and to help you keep time, as you've seen, the clock that's there with the light system. The device will be green for 4 minutes and will turn yellow with 1 minute remaining, and when the light turns red, it means that your time has expired, but you've already seen that no trap door will open up. But we are excited to have each of you here. And we will now, Chair will now recognize our witnesses for the purposes of the opening statements, beginning with Ms. McDonald. Welcome. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
I have to be careful, my voice carries very easily. Thank you, Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Lofgren, and members of the House Committee on House Administration for inviting me to here before you. It is an honor to give my testimony regarding my experiences as the Regional Federal Depository Library Coordinator for the University of Maryland, College Park, as well as at Clemson University. Before I proceed, I want to make sure I have to include this disclaimer that I'm testifying on behalf of myself with my own experiences. I made sure to consult legal at the different institutions to make sure that they understood that I was just testifying for me. I'm going to begin with my experiences at the University of Maryland and then kind of delve back into my experiences at Clemson. The University of Maryland Libraries, its mission is to support the intellectual inquiry and learning required to meet the education, research, and community outreach mission of the University of Maryland, which is comprised of over 39,000 students, 4,300 faculty, and 5,400 staff. On top of all of those research interests, we are also the Regional Federal Depository Library for 59 selective libraries in Maryland, Delaware, and DC, including 32 federal agency libraries. As the Regional Federal Depository Library Coordinator, I oversee the university and the region's U.S. government documents collections. This includes providing training, facilitating annual meetings, responding to depository questions, providing research support to the public, and overseeing the materials withdrawal process, which I'm sure you guys have read a great deal about at this point. Like many of my peers, I face the problem of having a growing collection that must be maintained in a finite amount of space with a finite amount of resources. Just consider, last year I had one student who worked 20 hours a week to shelve all materials, retrieve duplicate copies, offer them to other institutions, transport them to another department for processing, and when necessary, to ship them to the receiving institution. No matter how hard he and I tried, we simply could not keep up with the work. Fortunately, at Maryland, and as well as at Clemson, I have had very, very good positive working relationships with my colleagues, and they've been able to support me. And I find that bribing people with baked goods, bread pudding is a winner. People offer to help me move. So I highly recommend that. Just take some baked goods. But even with all of that, there comes a point where my colleagues kind of have to say, hey, we need to do our jobs too. You know, hold on to your baked goods for another 6 months, and then we can help you again. One of the ways that regional libraries can approach the problem of having expensive, low-use, space-consuming collections is to relinquish regional status, which we did at my previous institution, Clemson University. The decision to relinquish regional status was not made lightly. It took 2 years from when the idea was first broached to when we fully relinquished regional status. During that process, I undertook to examine all of the ways that it could impact other libraries in the region, the students, the users, and of course, the general public. How would it affect them? At Clemson, it was possible for us to relinquish regional status, at least in part because we were what's called a shared regional. We were co-regional. There was a second one in South Carolina that was perfectly happy to stay regional. So we were able to relinquish our regional status without having any negative impact on the public. 1 second, I need a little bit of water.
And while you're doing that, I also would note that the baked goods probably works really well for the intensity of questions by the committee, but that's just
In contrast, at the University of Maryland, we are the only regional for 3 areas, DC, Maryland, Delaware. So we don't have really that option. Many libraries rely upon us to help them fulfill their FDLP responsibilities. In order for us to continue as a regional, UMD needs greater flexibility and control over its collection. In particular, it would help if institutions were able to share regional Federal Depository Library materials between state lines. I've got selectives in other areas. Perhaps I can send some things their way when they want them. Save them some money and save me some space. Another way would be to give regional libraries more leeway to substitute electronic publications from approved sources, such as GovInfo and FDsys, in order to right-size our collections to the needs of our users and institutions. And I do mean, when I say users, I don't mean just the UMD community. I mean to the community at large, because as a regional, that is our community. Community is the region. And I know that some people have reservations. Oh, my time is up. So I'm going to wrap it up by saying that I appreciate you guys having me here today, and I welcome any questions. I'm right around your corner, so if you need to stop by, ask me some questions, feel free.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. The chair will now recognize Ms. Williams for 5 minutes for the purposes of an opening statement.
Chairman Harper and members of the committee, good morning. My name is Beth Williams, and I'm the director of the Robert Crown Law Library and senior lecturer in law at Stanford Law School. I'm currently serving in my second of a 3-year term as a member of the Government Publishing Office's Depository Library Council, and I'm pleased to appear to you before you today in my personal capacity. Thank you for the invitation to appear at this important hearing. I've been following the committee's review of Title 44, and I'm honored to be able to share my thoughts about potential reform. I approach the question of how best to improve and modernize Chapter 19 of Title 44 based on my experience not as a seasoned government documents librarian, but as a law librarian, working with and managing FDLP collections in private institutions like my home institution now, previously at Columbia Law School, and in public institutions during my tenure at Louisiana State University. Academic law libraries have relatively smaller but vital FDLP collections, including primarily the laws that govern this nation. And law librarians are nothing if not passionate about access to and preservation of the law. For the past 12 years, I've also had the privilege to teach law students at Stanford, at LSU, and at Columbia where and how to find the law. much of which is dependent upon a familiarity with the complex nature of legal publishing. As a member of the Depository Library Council, I've learned a great deal from my distinguished colleagues serving in different types of depository libraries, regional libraries, and other selective libraries like my own, public libraries, court, county, and state libraries, and fellow academic libraries. The diverse group of libraries in the FDLP share many similarities, the most important being our dedication to public service and providing our patrons with the broadest swath of government information. I've also witnessed GPO's dedication to this program and their efforts to forge creative solutions with the library community to the challenges inherent in this program. I believe that 3 key revisions to Chapter 19 of Title 44 would position the FDLP and the GPO to more efficiently, comprehensively, and successfully manage government information in the digital age. As it currently stands, the FDLP represents a strong and important partnership between the federal government and a diverse network of dedicated libraries and librarians to meet the goal of keeping America informed. The impetus to modernize Chapter 19 should focus on positioning the GPO to play a central role in managing the life cycle of government information, the vast majority of which is now digital, and disseminating that digital information in partnership with the network of FDLP libraries. To this end, I recommend the following 3 changes. First, the definition of government publication in Section 1901 of Title 44 should be amended to include information in all formats, including, most importantly, digital information. The current definition woefully fails to capture the universe of digital documents produced by the federal government. This is hardly surprising given its age. As early as 1990, my law librarian mentors were arguing for a format-neutral definition of government publication to include electronic information rather than relying on a 19th century notion of printing processes. Though no format is specified in the statutory definition, that is, the terms print or paper do not appear, many government agencies have erroneously interpreted the term document to be synonymous with paper, leaving the bulk of our nation's documentary heritage in the digital age either fragile or forgotten. Amending Section 1901 will place the GPO in partnership with the FDLP community in the best position to identify, describe, disseminate, and manage government information in all its formats. Second, the change to Section 1901 should be accompanied by an amendment to Section 1902 and following to require legislative, executive, and judicial branch agencies to deposit electronic publications with the GPO for dissemination. Many nations throughout the world collect their published output as systematically and comprehensively as possible through some form of so-called legal deposit, making this valuable content openly and freely available to current and future generations. In general, legal deposit schemes create a system in which publishers and libraries work together to ensure success in depositing content, irrespective of format or technology. The United States has been conspicuously absent in creating a legal deposit scheme for digital content. The method of the deposit required under the statute, in my opinion, should be neutral to allow GPO maximum flexibility to passively receive or actively harvest content in a variety of ways over time. Third, Chapter 19 should also be amended to include the obligation to preserve digital content obtained and distributed by the GPO. The GPO is well placed to take on a leadership role as a digital preservation manager, and I have confidence that they are capable and up to that task. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not include some mention of the financial costs involved in the FDLP. The digital age of publishing has opened up many new possibilities, bringing us closer to the ideal of universal access to the corpus of recorded knowledge. But like many great things of value, the cost is in no way cheap. Digital information disseminated through the FDLP should be free in precisely the same way print materials have been. The public should not have to pay a fee to hear our government when it speaks. Accordingly, Section 4102 of Title 44 should be amended to preserve this foundational democratic principle. Thank you again for the opportunity to share my opinions on this important subject, and I look forward to hearing any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. The chair will now recognize Stephen Parks for 5 minutes for questions and welcome you, and it's good to see my friend from Mississippi. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Harper and fellow committee members. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Stephen Parks, and I'm the State Librarian of the State Law Library of Mississippi. As a State Librarian, I oversee and direct the day-to-day operations of the State Library, and we have a staff of 4 librarians, including myself. And we have served as a selective depository library since the mid-1880s, with the University of Mississippi being our regional depository. We are located in the capital city of Jackson in Chairman Harper's district, and if I may say so myself, I believe we provide excellent service to all types of users, whether it's the court, school systems, state agencies, law firms, or just the general public. We recently hosted a visit by Dr. Carla, Dr. Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress, and thank you, Chairman Harper, for arranging that visit with us. And at that visit, she spoke of the importance of access to legal materials and how we as law librarians help provide this access, and the FDLP helps us in this endeavor. And we routinely serve members of the general public who seek out government information through the FDLP. This can include material from the Code of Federal Regulations, the U.S. Code, the United States Reporter, and most recently we had to utilize our microfiche reader and pull out older editions of the Federal Register. And without the FDLP sending us these items, we would not have been able to help those members of the public. So we strive to provide the most effective service we can to our patrons. As many academic law libraries and private law libraries oftentimes limit patron access, it's important that our state court libraries provide great service by being open and available to all citizens and by having these FDLP items readily accessible in various formats. And we continue to be grateful that in 1972 Congress enacted legislation that authorized the highest appellate courts of the state to participate in the program, and we would hope that any revisions of the FDLP will retain that provision and the flexibility it provides to the appellate courts. My purpose here today is to share with you some of the strengths of the FDLP and some of the opportunities for modernization that I believe could help. As far as the strengths, I believe that as a distributed network of libraries, the FDLP plays a critical role in providing permanent public access to government information, and it is a smart investment of our taxpayer dollars. The program relies on the willingness of libraries, such as ourselves, to provide this permanent public access in multiple formats, and in return, we receive from the government these free publications, opportunities for training, and various resources to offer local communities regardless of background or income. And this is especially true in Jackson when it comes to background and income, as in Jackson we have 4 selective depository libraries. 2 of those are law libraries, and of the 4 in Jackson, the state library is the most readily accessible. We do not restrict access by having, like for instance, the law school libraries are restricted to key card access now due to safety concerns. We at the state library are open to everyone. So we provide great access to those individuals in the public. And we are trained to answer questions about government websites, information, and documents, thus relieving the agencies themselves from having to answer those questions. We as librarians are here to help with that. The FDLP and the GPO have been of great assistance to me also in my role as a legal research instructor and an instructor at the University of Southern Miss in their Library and Information Science program. I like to warn law students that when they get out and practice as a solo practitioner, they might not be able to afford subscription-based services such as Westlaw or LexisNexis. On the flip side, I like to teach them how to use FDSys so they can get freely available resources to use in their practice. So I like to extol the GPO as a trusted resource where users can digitize authenticated government material for free. When looking at opportunities for modernization, I first believe it should be clear in any reform bill that GPO has an important role to play, not only in providing that permanent access, but also the preservation of government information in print and electronic formats. The statute is currently unclear about GPO's preservation role. Secondly, I think the current regional and selective model of the FDLP works well, but I understand there are pressures on some libraries, such as the regionals, to free up space in their libraries and offer greater access to born digital information. So I believe there should be some flexibility provided to regionals, and I would be interested in discussing that. And lastly, I also believe it is important for Congress to continue to invest in govinfo.gov, the website which will eventually replace FDSys. Currently under Section 4102 of Title 44, GOP is allowed to charge fees for public access, but I would suggest that this language be substituted with language assuring no fee public access. In conclusion, I'm grateful to be here today and look forward to discussing ways in which the FDLP operates and ways that it can be improved.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. The chair will now recognize Mike Furlow of HaTiTrust for 5 minutes for the purposes of an opening statement. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Lofgren and the other members of the committee. I much appreciate the opportunity to be here today and share with you my thoughts on transforming the Government Publishing Office and the Federal Depository Library Program. I'm going to speak from my experience as the director of HaTiTrust, which is an organization that's supported by over 130 academic and research libraries. We operate a certified, trusted digital library and preservation repository that preserves over 16 million digitized books, journals, and federal documents. Many of these were digitized through large-scale digitization partnerships led by Google and the Internet Archive and others. And really our goal is to help our libraries work collaboratively to address challenges that they each face individually, but to do so at scale in innovative and affordable ways. I'll focus most of my comments on the digitization of federal documents. Over the decades, as you know, GPO has distributed millions of documents to hundreds of libraries across the country so that individuals can have ready and in-person access to government information. But today, especially after the internet, libraries have shifted their primary emphasis away from building large physical collections towards services to help individuals find and use and create information. I'm speaking very broadly here. Free public access to U.S. government information remains imperative, but it is not necessary to duplicate this information in physical format so extensively. The future requires that we have fewer duplicative print collections and that we place a greater emphasis on collaboratively managing the existing library collections we have. I think we can foresee a day when the majority of historical federal publications will be available online, but we are not there yet. Today, HaTiTrust includes over 1 million U.S. federal documents that were digitized from the collections of depository libraries. We're continually working to locate and digitize millions more, and these are among the most heavily consulted items in our collection. Anyone with access to the internet can read these documents in HaTiTrust, as well as millions of other open or out-of-copyright items. We don't charge for access to this collection. A user does not need to visit a library to gain access to read material in HaTiTrust. We pair these services with ongoing programs that are really important to do things like improve the quality of digital copies, improve the cataloging so it's easier to find what you're looking for, provide these materials to users who are print disabled, and make them available for text and data mining. Title 44 should recognize that digitized versions of historical documents are effective access substitutes for many uses, but not all uses. We'll always need to have libraries that retain and preserve physical collections of print material for consultation. But today, as you've heard, libraries face significant space constraints for their collections and their services, and they're looking to reduce costly duplication in the entirety of their collections. To help address this, we've undertaken a program that is developing a geographically distributed shared print collection among our members. This will mirror the entirety of the digitized collection. Under the program, our members will retain in suitable environments specific materials for a minimum of 25 years. A registry of these retention commitments will allow libraries to compare their collections with what others have retained and are promising to keep, and that will allow them to make choices about what they retain and what they withdraw when appropriate to do so. I believe these services can help us manage the collective collection well into the future. We do not have any direct affiliation with GPO, but we do count among our members 128 federal depository libraries. 17 of these are regionals. They are the leaders in our government documents work. And as you know, GPO has undertaken similar work. It's partnered with the Library of Congress, for example, to digitize the statutes at large in the congressional record. Their FIPNet program provides for a limited number of depository libraries to retain print copies so that others can discard. But GPO's regulations and resource constraints have sometimes made it difficult for libraries to work innovatively and creatively, and it's often been more challenging to collaborate. Going forward, I would hope that such programs could be expanded and aligned with best practices and programs that libraries are establishing, whether through us or other regional efforts that they undertake. I believe GPO really should be empowered to build upon these efforts and not feel the need to duplicate them all. Title 44 should be modernized to reflect how contemporary libraries operate. It should promote comprehensive and enduring digital access to government information created in the future, and also to documents published in the past. It should ensure the privacy of individuals who access digital government documents, and regulations at GPO should enable the libraries to more easily collaborate among themselves. Finally, I think GPOs should be able to easily make use of the results of such collaborations in the work of their libraries by having clear authority to accept gifts. And lastly, I believe Title 44 should help these libraries more cost-effectively manage their collections. What we have seen over the past decades is that when research libraries can collaborate at very large scales, they can dramatically and affordably improve long-term and durable access to information. And preservation and access really is our business, and we're ready to work with the GPO and other organizations to help ensure that public information endures. So thank you very much, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Furlow, and thanks to each of you for your testimony. And now we have time for questions. So as chair, I will recognize myself for 5 minutes for the purpose of questions. And if you would make sure all your mics are turned off until you answer, that'll just kind of help with any feedback we might incur. But this really is a very important issue. I agree with, associate myself with Ms. Lofgren's comments earlier that it's important as part of regular order to review this, go through this process to see how we can make something that we like better and be ready to move to the future. So I'll recognize myself now. And I'll start with you, Mr. Parks, and ask you a couple of questions. And first of all, congratulations on your August event that you had with Dr. Carla Hayden. It's pretty special to know that Mississippi became a state in mid-December of 1817 and January of 1818. What happened?
Just a month after becoming a state, the legislature passed a resolution directing the Secretary of State to purchase books and maps, and that collection has evolved into what has become today's library.
That's a great story, and so you had Dr. Hayden in August, and you have a special guest coming in tomorrow, I believe.
Tomorrow, Chief Justice John Roberts will be in attendance to celebrate the judiciary's bicentennial. He'll be hosting a moot court argument between Mississippi College and the University of Mississippi.
And we can't wait to see who you're going to have in October. So this will be great.
Yeah.
So
have to celebrate the entire year.
There you go. In your written testimony, you state, beyond mere access, FDLP libraries have skilled librarians who assist the public in navigating the government information available to them. Would you share with us your view on how GPO's role in training helps FDLP librarians?
Well, training in general helps because a lot of times when the public approaches a law library, they approach a law library nervously. They don't know what they're looking for, how to look for it, or how to even interpret it. I mean, as librarians, we can't interpret it, but we can lead them to the material themselves. So anytime GPO or the FDLP is able to provide training, whether it be in-person training or webinar, I try to push my staff members to sign up for that just to help, because you never know when we're going to get someone from the public coming in who has no clue what to do, and we're there to help them find that material.
That's great. And, you know, as a selective depository librarian, share with us your relationship with your regional depository.
We have a great relationship. We have a new director at the regional. Her name is Ashley Dees. The previous one, Laura Harper, retired last year. I was not able to work directly with her. She was retiring as I came on board, but I have been in touch with Ashley. We've discussed ways that we could actually increase parts of our collection from the FDLP, and we plan to meet up at the Mississippi Library Association meeting next month. So we do have a great relationship. Anytime we need something from them, they're willing to either come down to Jackson, or we even go up to Oxford occasionally and determine what we could do to increase our relationship.
When we talk about the regional depository, let's say that the University of Mississippi were to relinquish its status as a regional depository, how would that impact the State Law Library of Mississippi?
I think it would impact the entire state. We only have one regional, whereas some states have two. But I do think we would work through it. We have 11 selectives throughout the entire state, and at least 4 just in the Metro Jackson area. So I would assume we would all get together and work through it. Of course, we would like to have the university remain the regional depository or some other library step up, but we would do our best to work through it. I would even consider offering us up as a regional, but we don't have the space. And so I know exactly what they mean when the regionals talk about space issues, because we don't have much space either.
Got it. Well, we're not planning on University of Mississippi giving up that status on that. And this is to the whole panel, whoever would care to answer this. Digital preservation of documents requires 3 core components: resources, policy infrastructure, and technical infrastructure. Am I missing any in that? Could you help guide us on what might be required to preserve the electronic federal collection? Anybody want to comment on that?
I'll take a stab at that. I believe that I want to echo something that Ms. Hall said earlier today, which is that I think collaboration is really critical in this. There is a role for certain kinds of centralization for organizations to take responsibility for retaining and preserving digital information or print information. But you need a network of these. You need different organizations to take on different kinds of roles. You need different libraries to take on different kinds of roles. I believe some specialization is necessary, especially when we look to the future of digital information. The necessity is that you have different expertise in different places, and you draw upon that as needed. So,
thanks to each of you. The chair will now recognize Ms. Lofgren for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is excellent testimony, and you've all made very important suggestions that hopefully we can incorporate as we look to do even better at preserving and making accessible the information that belongs to the public. Just seeing the geographic breadth of our witnesses from Maryland to California, Mississippi, you can see that this really spans the whole United States. How interested in Pennsylvania, of course. So I have just a couple of questions. You know, I was reading your bio, Ms. Williams, and I see that you taught legal research one time. A long time ago, I taught legal research, and it's completely different now that with the digital world that we have than when I taught that. I'm thinking about what role we need to play, if any, in making sure that the platforms are accessible to the public. And I'll just, we have oversight over the Copyright Office. Every one of us believes in strong copyright protection. On the other hand, if there are barriers to access to information, that's a competing interest because the public has a right to see the law. So are there things that should be brought to our attention, Ms. Williams? For example, we've got different formats. For some reason, lawyers like to use WordPerfect instead of Word. We've got Page. We've got different proprietary programs that we may or may not have rights to use under copyright protection, and yet without access to those programs, the data that the public owns is simply inaccessible. Is that a problem, or am I making up a problem?
Thank you. I don't think you're making up the problem. I think as a threshold matter, teaching law students how to do legal research has become more complicated rather than less complicated in the digital age. In terms of how the GPO should position itself in order to better serve the public, I guess I want to step back and say one thing. The primary commercial publishers of U.S. law are not United States companies. So if it were possible for a revision of Title 44 to include bulk digital access to the primary laws of this country, which is pretty much my motivation for being involved here today, that could open up, at a minimum, opportunities for questions for researchers that people in my home institution are hungry to pursue, but also, is it me? Thank you. I was sure it was going to be my fault if something went wrong. But to offer bulk access to the primary laws of this country in a digital form could also change the commercial industry. We have many startups in my part of the country that are trying to innovatively create broader access to legal research materials, and that would be a fantastic outcome to broaching the problems of managing digital information. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I guess I'd say we're always worried about what the formats are, how accessible they are, and how freely accessible they are.
Right.
So,
well, it does, and it leads to the next question, which I raised to the prior witness, about standards that are incorporated by reference into law that are then locked off because of copyright assertion to the public, which to me is a huge due process issue. I mean, if you're required to comply with a provision of law that you can't learn about.
I couldn't agree more. The publicresource.org case that's pending before the D.C. Circuit is an incredibly important one, and I think one that most members of the public are not woke to. They don't realize that if private companies claim some ownership over the laws that bind our citizens, that could have incredibly personal negative implications.
Well, and just a final question. I also come from Silicon Valley. I'm proud. I mean, I'm a Stanford grad and glad to see somebody from home here on the panel. Silicon Valley is the hotbed of innovation. It seems to me that access to the raw information must be made available to the public, but there's tons of room to innovate in the private sector on manipulating, understanding, using, slicing and dicing that information that would still be a profit center for people who wanted to do that.
There's no doubt that even something as currently interesting as data analytics, as a threshold matter, these companies need to get access to the data first. And right now there are too many impediments.
My time is up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lofgren. Gentlelady yields back. The chair will now recognize Mr. Davis, Vice Chairman of the committee, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. Chairman and I were just discussing moot court competitions in Mississippi for lawyers. I didn't know if that was a requirement down there or not, but it seems like you have an exciting, you've had a few exciting weeks and exciting few weeks in front of you too, so congratulations. My questions are actually for Ms. McDonald. What type of baked goods do you usually bring?
I've actually had to get some variety in there. Originally it was a pumpkin bread pudding with a rum raisin caramel sauce. People do the heavy lifting when I bring that in. And then black bottom brownies with chocolate chip cheesecake on top, and most recently a chiffon cake with whipped cream and berries.
I'm going to ask the chairman to have you back next week. Those are gourmet baked goods, yes.
I have to bring the good stuff because these are difficult projects.
Well, that is great. Hey, maybe that'll work with us too. We'll bring those down to our next retreat. Hey, Ms. McDonald, you were an FDLP librarian at a regional depository when the decision was made to relinquish regional status and instead become a selective depository. Why was that decision made?
For several reasons. I would say the biggest overarching one was space concerns. The collection occupied the majority of what was the third floor, but was actually kind of the ground floor. And on a lot of college campuses, administrations are looking into the libraries. They want to transform those spaces to more user spaces, to computer labs, to high-tech spaces like maker spaces where you've got 3D printing that can help students with their research and their group projects. So they really wanted to see a way to repurpose that space. And at the same time, for the libraries, The big issue was that we had a lot of stuff that was duplicated electronically as well as there, and it was very, very hard for us to justify using that space when there was another regional in the state that would happily hold on to all of that. We were not required to get rid of too many things, and in fact, I reached out to my colleagues there, and they've only gotten rid of a bit of it. The stuff that they've gotten rid of was actually degrading. It was microfiche, and so it was going to be rendered unusable anyway. But they've also been able to repurpose that space. And for me, I signed up for it because after my research, I was able to ascertain that I could continue to provide access to that content. And that for me is the bottom line. I don't really, if somebody comes in and asks me a question, I don't care where they're from. All I care about is getting them the right information at the right time. And when I was able to see that I could continue to provide access to that content we had on our shelves, even if we were selective, then that's kind of when I said yes, that we should move forward with this.
Was that process to move from a regional to a selective library an easy process?
No. It took about, I would say, it took 2 years overall, but overall the big part of it was the beginning part of it. I had to send out a letter, kind of a warning, saying, hey, we're looking at relinquishing regional status. And I sent that to all stakeholders, legislators, the university campus, so that people could send us feedback and their opinions, so that this was kind of the time for them to say, no, we don't want this. We also used that time to talk with GPO, other selectives in the library, the other regional, to make sure that they were okay with us relinquishing regional status. And then after that first letter was sent out, 6 months later, we sent out our second letter saying, okay, we talked with everybody, now we're relinquishing regional status, and this is the effective date.
Do you think you'll maybe go through that process with the University of Maryland?
I don't know.
And how do you, why not?
Well, for one thing, it's a much trickier situation. We have 3 areas. We've got DC, we've got Delaware, we've got Maryland. And if we relinquish regional status, then all of the libraries that are not federal agency libraries will have to retain everything that's in their collection. They will not be able to discard their materials. The federal agencies have different rules, so they would be able to discard materials through the Library of Congress or through NARA, but everybody else who's not a federal agency, they would be stuck with all of their materials. Additionally, I think as close as we are to DC, I've worked a great deal, get more and more with NARA and Library of Congress, where they have to refer questions our way. I'm finding out that our collections complement each other, that each group kind of has different types of materials that are accessible.
So kind of regional centers of excellence then? If their collections complement each other, so is there discussion on you get these types of materials here? Because obviously there's a problem holding on to collections in perpetuity, correct?
Right.
So are you communicating with other regionals and other FDLPs and other selectives to basically say, how do we maximize our space to be able to have access to those collections, and therefore we can interchange?
Yes, I am. Sorry, too loud. Got a very loud voice.
It's okay, pumpkin, spice, red pudding.
I'll bring that next time.
That'd be awesome.
I am talking with them. I'm hoping that, I've been exploring it more recently. I've been visiting some federal agencies actually, where one agency is collecting a title and they're actually paying for it to be bound. As a regional, I'm getting it bound for free. And for the purposes of my institution, we don't actually need those bound copies. We're keeping the historical ones, but those more recent ones we have no real use for. We have them in a variety of other formats. My question right now is, though, I'm not sure that I can work out a shared agreement with them, because technically they're across the state line. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to actually go into that.
Sounds like healthcare.
Because right now, the barriers that we have right now is you can't send it across the state line. So it'd be lovely if I could do that. I could save the Fed some money, save myself some space. That's a win-win situation.
I know you're out of time, and I'm out of time, but happy to work with you to address those state line issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair will now recognize Mr. Raskin for 5 minutes for the purpose of questioning.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and hello to all the witnesses, and thank you for your excellent testimony. Special welcome to you, Ms. McDonald, from my home state. And actually wanted to ask a question of you, actually anybody who else wants to take a shot at it. I know that there are commercial services that sell government publications, that centralize them. And I'm wondering, do your libraries use these services? Why do you use them if you do? Does that make it easier for library patrons to access the documents? Are the contents generally not part of the FDLP collection? So I'm just curious about your relationship with these commercial services. I don't know if Ms. Williams or Ms. McDonald, you want to start?
I actually live in your district, too.
All the better. and I've got a sweet tooth myself, if we're honest.
I would say that, yes, we do use those commercial products. They're very valuable and very, very helpful. A lot of times there's content overlap. We are getting materials that GPO or the feds have put out. However, our users find them easier to use, to navigate those resources in there. In particular, we used to have Westlaw at University of Maryland, and law librarians and law students love Westlaw. I find for Maryland, actually, though, that's kind of posing a problem for us because although we've got a flat budget due to serials inflation across all disciplines, having a flat budget is a little bit like getting a cut budget. And so a couple of years ago, we actually had to cut Westlaw from our collections. We had content overlap from another database, and so we had to use that, but it was a very unpopular decision. I wish somebody had brought me some bread pudding that day. But we use a lot of different resources. I actually contacted my colleague at Maryland, and at least 11% of our collection of our database prices go to these supplementary subscription services. And that's
just back on that Westlaw point, does that mean that the law professors?
That's all of them. That covers several providers. I chose our top 5.
Does that mean that the law professors and law students at University of Maryland Law School are not able to use Westlaw, or do they have a separate?
They actually are separate because it's up in Baltimore. Those students can go in and use all the resources up there.
I got you. So it's different for the law school, but generally Westlaw is not available to people who patronize the
I miss it. It was a lot easier to help people before.
Yeah, so, and you were able to save how much money by eliminating those services?
I think that was over $50,000, but I can't remember the exact number. I can get it.
Yeah, okay. Ms. Williams?
I'll just add that most academic libraries spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to buy public domain materials from a variety of commercial vendors. Some of those vendors restrict access so that the contracts are incredibly limited. Only full-time faculty, staff, and students of the law school, for example, have access under the Westlaw and Lexis contracts that we sign. They are unbelievably rigid about those terms. They will not open up the packages to other entities and even a university community without considerable cost. But we also buy other forms of commercial access to public domain content because they have metadata that's incredibly important for us. They're provided in a digital format that is not otherwise available. Digitized hearings, for instance. We spend huge amounts of money to be able to have access to that kind of material because it's a more robust search that makes discovery a whole lot more possible. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair will now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Loudermilk, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was not sure after this weekend if the gentleman from Mississippi would recognize the gentleman from Georgia, but I'm glad that we still keep.
Thank you for mentioning that, Mr. Loudermilk.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this hearing. Mr. Furlow, understand that HathiTrust is creating a registry of U.S. documents. Is that true?
Yes, sir, that's true.
Okay. How does your registry differ from the catalog of government publication that the superintendent of documents is required?
Thank you for the question. The registry of federal publications that HathiTrust is developing is somewhat broader, and it is intended to not only identify federal publications that exist, but also for us to be able to identify materials that are held in libraries so that then we can identify them for digitization as well. The way we have proceeded to create that registry is to collect a significant number, really over 25 million catalog records from libraries of items that they identified as federal documents. We then analyze those records and have reduced them down to identify what we believe to be not a complete set, but a much reduced size registry. I think librarians and GPO would recognize that the catalog of government publications is not complete. Materials that were published prior to 1976 were often not cataloged. There really isn't a single location to go to identify every publication that was produced at federal expense. So we've undertaken this project both to help us digitize materials, but also to help our member libraries and the public really understand what is the corpus of federal documents, and to do so a little bit more broadly than I think what is covered in Title 44.
Okay, so do you perceive that HathiTrust, your project would meet the criteria of what the superintendent of documents is required to?
I don't believe I could answer that question without consulting those criteria.
Okay. Is it something you're willing to share with the federal government?
I'm sorry?
Is your project something you're willing to share with the federal government?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yes. And it is available right now for anyone to search. As I said earlier, I think I want to understand what are the requirements and obligations of GPO for gift authority at that time.
Okay. Well, thank you. No further questions.
Gentleman yields back. Again, we would like to thank each one of you for being here. This was, this is in the weeds information, very, very helpful to us as we go forward, particularly looking at how to modernize Title 44. So this is essential, and you each helped us a great deal. So without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair additional written questions for the witnesses, which we will forward and ask the witnesses to respond as promptly as you can, so that those answers may be made a part of the record. I would also like to ask for unanimous consent that the record be left open for 10 additional business days to allow members of the public to submit written questions on this issue. Without objection, this hearing is adjourned.